to go ahead and get started. I'm a stickler a bit about time because we don't have enough of it and I don't want to waste anybody's. So welcome this afternoon to this session. My name, they absolutely demoted me in the hallway, although I love my husband. I'm Mrs. Elizabeth Baker, that's true. He's David and he's a saint. But I'm Dr. Elizabeth Baker. I'm actually an associate professor in information systems, which is over in the School of Business. For those of you who don't know what information systems is, it's basically applied computer science. So my undergraduate is in physics and engineering, and then I'm old a bit, and software was just becoming a thing, and I programmed systems for satellites. Basically, is how I sort of grew up, and then when software became a thing, I became a software engineer and ended up in the business school because it was a quicker doctorate than an engineering doctorate. So there you go. So what I talk about and what I research in cybersecurity and my background with the military, programming satellites and such, has to do with national security typically, and it's where I started with a lot of my ethics and law, but in moving into the business world, now cybersecurity is really an idea of risk, right, and financial loss. But what I want to talk about with you all today is a much broader topic, and that is we've got some questions that we need to ask ourselves as engineers and business people, but engineers, about what we're doing in light of the rapid technological advancements that we're going through and how we as engineers can influence this progress, okay? Because I don't think we spend enough time thinking about this or doing anything about it, and we need to change that. So let's talk about something we're very familiar with, and that is rapid technological advancement, right? And I'm probably old enough to be most everybody's mother in here. Rapid technological change has been around forever, all right? It's nothing new. Agriculture, development of tools, rail, electricity. There have been many eras where we have rapidly moved forward, and it has changed society as a result, right? We in engineering like to think, oh, we're divorced from people, we're divorced from society, that has nothing to do with us, we just sit down and we solve our problems, and it has like not much to do with people. Well, that's convenient if you're not a people person, but the reality is that it impacts our society. We are not living in a bubble. The tools that we develop, the basic science that becomes uncovered, how we apply that, all has an impact on the environment that we engineer, how we live, right? And the faster it goes, the quicker we have to make decisions about how we want that to impact our lives, right? And the most clear example, do any of you in here have children? Anybody have children? You're like, yeah, I made that lifestyle choice. It's okay. I picked children because we're teaching them things about phones that our parents didn't teach us, right? So technology has moved so fast that I've got to teach them things about using their cell phones wisely that my parents never taught me, right? So you think about parenting and you parent the way that your parents parented you, and now we're in a situation where it's a whole new world of things that we've got to train them on or teach them about that just didn't exist, right? And it's an even more important worry because I used to only have one thing that could kill them when they were 16 years old, and that was their car. Now I have two things that can kill them, their phone and their car. Put them together and it's three things. I have an interaction of that, the phone and a car, right? And if I asked you, would you give your child a gun? You would say no. And I'm like, well, then why would you give them a phone? And they're like, well, it's not that dangerous. And I'm like, well, then you haven't done the work that I've done in forensics then, because you're wrong. And so the point of this slide is just, as engineers, this is going faster and faster because of basic science advancements, right? So CPU growth, RAM growth, storage space, networking speed, networking capacity growth. Right? Every minute, the nanoscale people are coming up with, faster and wider fiber optic cable. People are doing magic at this point, right? I mean, you look at those guys and gals and you're like, what are y'all doing up there? All right? It's amazing. And even worse, or even better, so depending on how you look at it, data. There's more of it, we process more of it, we collect more of it, and we disseminate more of it. What is the impact that's having? Okay. I am of a generation where I really don't get Instagram very much because I don't think I'm interesting enough that anybody would want to know what pictures of me are happening. Do you know what I mean? Like, who cares what I'm eating, where I'm going, or what I'm doing? That's like for my personal scrapbook. Like, who cares? Maybe my parents, you know, but they only want to see my kids. They couldn't care about me, right? It's just a different mentality about these tools that we've created. And they allow very different capacities to arise. And what we never envisioned were the societal impacts. And just to make this clearer, again, I use a lot of personal stories because I think it makes it more interesting, because a lot of these things we see as solving engineering problems, but it really isn't that. It's sort of how it impacts you. I graduated college in 1994. I was 22, so 1994. And if you were a young woman in 1994 and you found yourself pregnant and you wanted to give your child up for adoption, you could reasonably expect that you could give that child up and never see that child again if that was your choice. Okay, if you were assaulted, if you just made a mistake, you could also choose to terminate, but you could give that baby up and reasonably expect never to see that baby again. You had no idea that Facebook was coming, that Twitter was coming, or the DNA databases were coming. And so imagine you're now 45, 50 years old, and a 30-year-old DMs you on Facebook and says, "Hi, I'm your long-lost child. I'd like to get in contact with you." Meanwhile, you have a new family. You have not told them about maybe one of the worst times in your life. And if you had to go back, you might have made a different decision if you had known this technology was coming, right? That is what we are dealing with when we're talking about the societal impacts of rapid technological change. You're making decisions today that you have no idea how that's going to go going forward. I made a similar decision about my children just this year. I have a child with autism, and they're trying to collect DNA data to determine how much of it is genetic. And I said, I'm not comfortable with that, because once it's in a genetic database, then that will follow his medical record around. Well, since in the United States, your medical record is tied to your employment record, I worry about employment discrimination going forward for him. Just like there's pregnancy discrimination, although they say it's illegal, okay? I don't buy that. I'll never buy that. I worry. I'm making a decision like, is that so? Pictures of my children on the internet. I put some up there, but not many, because they're going to have to answer for them. You're seeing now these children who've been on YouTube channels, who've been on mom influencer, they're getting to be 18 and they're like, we lost our childhood. People recognize us from all of these, snippets or whatever. I got no money. There's no legal protection for me. And do you let me be exploited like this? Even child actors are protected. So we move this technology along without thinking about societal ramifications. And I'm talking about the things that I'm willing to have recorded on film. I'm not talking about all the super disgusting things that happen that I could talk about, that we probably ought to talk about over in criminal justice. All right. So we develop these things and we don't intend for them to be used this way, but we have to respect the fact that they're applied in many different use cases that we don't anticipate. And it can be decades later, right? So 23andMe, I'm that person in your family who's like, when someone's like, here, I'm giving it out as a gift, I like grab it all and I throw it in the trash. I'm like, no. Because, not that I have a problem with it if you want to know that Aunt Sally isn't really your mom and that Uncle Jim isn't your dad. I don't care about that. That's good for a book or memoir. But what I care about is that law enforcement can buy that data on the secondary market legally, and you've just subjugated the Bill of Rights in the US. Now, the government cannot gather data on you. They can't surveil you for law enforcement purposes unless you've sold the data to somebody else, you've given it freely, and you've given them permission to resell it, and law enforcement buys it. You've given up a constitutional right because you have willingly given over your data and they have sold it. And you cannot tell them not to sell it because they'll say, then don't use our service. And I'm like, if you're really dying to know, then don't go get a private Tesla. Don't use these databases. So this is going to continue to happen. Okay. And as we go further out, this slope gets steeper, which means the more we can process, the more tools we have, the more rapid our investigations result, the more rapid our development is. That is all of technology. This is computing technology. I don't believe in the singularity. I just like this graphic. In terms of computing power, and I'm going to make an argument that cybersecurity in a minute is software safety, the ability for software to be safe. We are driving a faster and more complex car, and it's getting more complex and faster every minute. And it's only getting worse, right? Large language models. We now have artificial intelligence that can take moral action without moral reasoning. Like, it's getting crazy out there, all right? And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. You're in engineering, you know this is happening, but you may not feel a part of it. Like, you're like, yeah, I'm doing this. I want to be on the vanguard, so I'm an engineer. But at the same time, are you an engineer that thinks about the way you're designing things and how that's going to impact other people? You're not, I agree. Because we don't teach, we don't imbue as professionals personal responsibility for what we design. We like the science part, we ignore the art part of engineering. And I think that's a crippling mistake for a lot of reasons. And I'll talk about that toward the end. So I came up with a framework for what I think is the future of security engineering, cybersecurity engineering. And it varies from anything that you'll see. One, I take the systems approach. I'm not going to talk a lot about this today, but this is the belief fundamentally that security is not a technical, merely a technical consideration, that you can put every lock on the door, but it is a socio-technical consideration. And you can't engineer people. Like, it's a bummer, but you can't Six Sigma them. So you got to figure out how you're going to deal with organizations and social actors when you're dealing with security engineering. Okay, you can't do it without that. And if we don't, and so then you're gonna have to deal with the law and you're gonna have to deal with ethics because you've got that social piece. So why we have cybersecurity programs that don't have ethics components in it, I'm not sure, because you're only teaching half, in my opinion, again, it's all me, you're only teaching half of the game, okay? The other thing I believe is about ethics. I don't want anybody who's ever been in my lecture hall or in my classroom or who's listened to me to wake up one day, as many software engineers have, and say, I can't believe that I developed that. Look what it's made. There are many a person, in fact, one just testified this week, he was a developer at Instagram, I believe, and he was testifying in front of Congress, knowing he'll never have another job again in Silicon Valley, saying Instagram, Facebook now, Meta, whatever, does not put the security on it to keep predators from teenagers on Instagram. I built it. I built the software that bypasses those locks. I've written the memos. I've told them to put them on, and they said it's not feasible or it's not in our best interest. The locks are there. They're not engaging them. That's an ethical business decision. That's an ethical decision-making standpoint. And he built it, and he's like, I regret that because I don't have the power as an engineer to steer the outcome of what I made. Well, you don't want to be the person who can't sleep at night. I'm going to give you some examples. You also don't want to be the engineer that does something and you land in jail. Because now the American justice system is putting engineers that do illegal things under their job, putting them in jail. And I'll talk about that. The Volkswagen guy who got around emissions. Okay. The Flint water people who poisoned water. The engineers who did that. So you're not just, Volkswagen's not just paying $2 billion in penalties. The engineer who designed the testing equipment to fool the California government for 10 years went to jail. He's done. Okay. Everyone. The other thing about engineering that we do is we cater to only a certain subset of the population. And working primarily in healthcare that I do, pulse oximeters only work for people with light skin. They chronically underrepresent people who have darker opacities of skin. And it looks like you're getting more oxygen than you're really getting, so you're going to die of COVID quicker because I don't know that your lung capacities decrease because my sensors are not good for your skin. Because I only tested them as a medical device manufacturer on lighter skinned people. Another one, I'll talk about it, True Color, which has to do with the fact that film cameras are optimized for people with light skin. So if you're a person of color and you've ever tried to take a picture of someone who's brighter than you, it's really hard for you to look good. I don't mean to be looking at you, but I mean, it's happening to you. You're smiling. You're like, man, I look terrible. And that person looks like the sun. That's absolutely right. And we do it on purpose. And I'm going to tell you a story about that when we get to that piece. We've got to start, that is an engineering decision about maximizing light exposure in photon buckets on charge coupled devices in your camera. That's all that is, the engineering decision. That could be fixed. And it's not. And why not? Okay, so these are the things that you have within your power to investigate and change or build from the start. So why are we sitting here going, oh, this is just a technical decision? Because for all those engineers it was, why are we not doing this? So if you know that sort of this is my philosophy about teaching engineers, I've messed up, of course I messed something up. Oh, what have I done? It doesn't like me. We knew it was going to happen. All right. So software. I know that y'all are mostly cybersecurity folks and software, so I'm going to sort of narrow this down to something that you're more interested in, so I can be talking more broadly. I call software safety, cybersecurity are the same thing. So broadly, I investigate safety, all right, but safety from a software perspective. We have only gotten software that's more and more complex. And when we talk about software and we say, oh, it's ready for production, what do we mean? That it's reliable, that it works. That's all we need. Because back in the day, when you had a mechanical system or an electrical system, if it worked, it was okay. You were like, okay, we're ready to sell it. And then when it blew somebody up, you're like, oh, maybe we got to make it safer, right? And that's what we do with software, right? We get it out the door and they're like, ooh, there's some bugs. We'll patch that in post, right? We'll get that. We'll squash those bugs later, okay? But the problem with software is it's different than civil engineers and it's different than electrical engineers because software doesn't fail because it's an abstraction. It's not a concrete entity, right? So it can't really fail. There's no reliability to it. That's kind of a false concept. What you have is you have logical rigor, but you really don't have this concept of failure. So how do you make software safe, right? Software also, because it's not tangible. I mean, a bridge, you can design a bridge as a civil engineer and it will either stand or it won't, right? In software, all kinds of crazy things will compile. That means it's going to do what it's supposed to, but it'll compile for you. And you're like, great. Well, because of this unlimited system complexity, you can never design a complete testing regimen. You're never going to be able to test for every single possible combination that's going to go wrong. I mean, you could, mathematically speaking, but it wouldn't be realistic, wouldn't be cost effective, wouldn't be worthwhile. And the other thing about software that's really crummy is because it's all this abstraction, The only way that you can test that it is secure or safe is context dependent. There is no universal law of secure software. It depends on where it is applied. There's no physics. And again, all the formal methods people can come at me with their weapons and say, yeah, formal methods can prove that there's one big theory of secure software. Bring it on. Tell me, when you prove it to me, I'll believe you. But you've been doing it for 60 years and you come up with nothing, formal methods people. So until you prove me wrong, I'm going to say, nope. Software security depends on, cybersecurity depends on the context of where the software is deployed. And if that's the case, and we don't mind that because that's the case, you know, in a lot of things, the environment that you're in, the engineered environment, it determines a lot of how you are, right? Your nurture, right? How it is. So you can't just look at software in a lab and say, this is secure. You've got to put it out in the world, and then you can determine if it's safe. Who are the users? What's the organization that it's in? What's the context it's being used? I look at healthcare software all the time, and it's being tested in labs, and it's being tested by software engineers, and then it goes into a hospital where it's loud, it's fast, there's not complete information, and people are running around, and there are lots of liquids, bodily and otherwise, running around, and that system is supposed to work the same. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That software is ridiculous. It doesn't work at all. But they're like, it worked in our lab. I'm like, well, is that where it's going to be used? Have you seen what an ER looks like? There's nothing more infuriating than going to a doctor and having them look at the computer and not at you. I'm sick, not the computer, you clown. You can laugh. I was having contractions. I was giving birth. The dude was looking at the computer asking me questions. I'm like, that thing isn't giving birth. Person. It was also July at an academic hospital, and he was a resident and a new medical student in his first rotation, and he got me as a patient. So that was his bad luck. But I was like, dude, do not look at that thing. If you're going to ask me if I'm in pain, I have tears coming out of my face, and it feels like my stomach's getting exploded. And you're like, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel like shit. Put that in there. Right? And I study this for a living, which is not helpful. Okay, not helpful at all, right? So yeah, so the context was somebody tested this in the lab and it didn't go well in production, all right? And that is the role of software. So why then is cybersecurity such a persistent problem? And it's because we don't look at this. I knew I'd get my first John 25 minutes in. Thank you. No, I do this all the time. It's funny. That's not personal. I've yawned at my own lectures, so no judgment. Okay. You know, I teach from 7 to 9:40 most of the time at night, and I'm like, so don't worry about it. It's funny because nobody realizes they're doing it. It's persistent because we keep aiming for the full technical solution, not looking at the context, the environment, and the people. We don't look at the law. We don't look at the ethics of where we're doing this. We think we can come up with one big technical solution. We're going to come with that magic bullet, that magic box, that magic whatever it is that's going to handle all of this, and just keep blaming people that they're stupid. Has that worked for us? Just on a pragmatic level, telling people they're stupid. No, they seem to be very resistant to be called stupid, right? They continue to be stupid with no shame, right? My favorite saying about this is, malevolence and stupidity have the same outcome. So whether it's an intentional attack or an inadvertent attack, it's the same thing, like something goes wrong. So whether you're stupid or you're evil, the same bad thing's going to happen. And that's why cybersecurity is persistent, because we're not looking at, regardless of intention, we're not looking at the social problems that are going to, the social impact of it. And so the path forward is we need to come up with engineering methods that incorporate the social aspect of things. Not that all of you need to care about people or go be psychologists. I'm not saying that at all. You don't even have to know much about social science, but you have to respect the fact that your software is going to go into a context. It's not just going to be what you build, and you have to think about what those ramifications might be. Okay, Oppenheimer, did you all see that movie? Great movie, by the way, if you didn't see it. Yeah, it's really good. Did what he did because he had really smart people who weren't coordinated. They wouldn't have done what they did if they had been coordinated because they would have guessed what they were building. Wouldn't have done it. Well, they might have, but I doubt it. Okay, and so understanding that safety or security is emergent, that it comes from both the social part interacting with the technical part in your engineered product, right? That all these things come together, that it involves ethics as humans are involved. It involves everyone, both the people who design it and the people who use it. If I hear one more medical device designer or one more cybersecurity technician say it was the dumb user's fault, I'm going to say, well, then you are a bad designer because you need to design it to the level of the intellect of the person who's using it. And they're like, I can't possibly make it that dumb. I'm like, have you seen Fisher-Price toys? Those are amazing. There's a Fisher-Price toy where you can put an iPhone in there and it'll play music, and you can literally get a 3-year-old to put on songs. It's like a 4 or 5 function thing. If an engineer can make a Fisher-Price toy that you put an iPhone in that a kid can use, it has like a template over it, they design that. Looks like a teddy bear, you hit its paws, it does crazy stuff. You can engineer a medical device that somebody who has poor vision and needs to inject themselves into a port can use without mistakes. You know how they make sure that the iPhone is turned the right way? They have guides, visual guides, so that you know that's the right way up. If it's upside down, it'll sense it and it will spin it. I mean, they just thought about this. Or they put kids in there to have to make all the mistakes, right? They're making high margin off of this, I'm pretty sure. So the secret sauce to having better security, to having better products, is going to be this concept of involving ethics in everyone, because we're not going to fall under the fallacy of we're chasing just the technical solution. And ultimately, part of what I want to talk about in this talk is we're going to have a better society as a result. If you look at the UN, they're not millennium goals anymore because they're 20 years past the millennial goals. What are they, sustainable goals? Does anybody know the UN, the big goals that we have, like to feed everyone and sustainable energy? I don't remember what their name is anymore. I think maybe it's sustainable goals. Yeah. Or the big change goals. Did you also know these? The National Institute of Engineers, Academy of Engineers subscribes to them. But almost all of them have a basis in engineering to make humanity better. But it's all in a better spot. But at heart, almost all of them are engineering problems, right? And so why are we solving engineering problems? Are we solving them because we like technical problems, or because we want our world and our society to be better? Why are we doing it? Why are you getting your degree? Now, if you say because I want to make a lot of money and eat better, I'm good with that. I'm not in the business school, okay? Like, that's okay. But if you get to be my age and you're sitting around like, why am I really doing this? Right? You don't want to say, I'm just doing this to take, necessarily. Maybe it's because I want to make sure that what I'm contributing to is something more positive, right? Something that's greater than just compensation. Ethical, social, and political issues. I'm not a philosopher. But I want to put it in a context, and I want to be very clear that this is America-centric. When we talk about the law, we have to talk about the government that you're in. If I were to talk about ethics in a dictatorship, the ethics of a dictatorship are the ethics of the dictator. You see what I mean? Okay, so ethics and the law are very different country to country. There's no generalizable situation about ethical concerns. Americans forget this because we forget a lot of things, okay? But when I'm making this discussion, ethics have to do with the individual, what you decide your ethical concerns are, okay? You don't share them. You don't have to share them with anybody. They're yours. The way we operate in our society and in democracies in general, whether they're direct democracies or representative democracies, parliamentary systems, whatever the case is, what we do is we share our ethics and the majority wins, right? So we all get together and as a society, we make laws, right? And you see this every day. We've all decided it's a good idea to not go any faster than 65 miles an hour on the interstate in our cars, right? We decided it's better to be over 21 when you drink. Okay, whatever the case may be. Ethically, we may think different things. Another one is the age of marriage. In a lot of states, the age of marriage is 14, if your parents agree. 14. In other states, 18. Period. Can't have child marriage. Okay, varies. Every state can make its own rules. Okay, so then if you have a law that you don't like, we try to influence policy. So policy is what we call the hyper law influence, right? It's what you do to try to influence people's ethics. Before policy, the only thing that influenced people's ethics was religion. This is an important statement. Before we had policy, the only thing that influenced people's ethics was their religion. The amazing thing about the US, and I'm a bit of a homer, I'll admit it, but the amazing thing about the US is we divorced religion from our government. So we needed a way to influence ethics that didn't involve the Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury, or a king, or a president. So what we did was we made this concept of policy. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that these super PACs and the things that influence our policy have a lot of money and a lot of power, and they're full of rich people, because guess what? That's what the church was, folks. We haven't moved terribly far as a human condition on this, all right? But that's the United States. You didn't, at least it wasn't a religious word, right? And they use guns and stuff in religious word, and we just use money. It's a little neater, right? I mean, different scoreboard, okay? Dollars are better than bullets, generally speaking, okay? Although I'll take questions on that. I'll debate that. But so this is my general idea of how these relate. But again, this is not new. Like, we've been doing this all along. I'm bringing it to you all as engineers because this is where you're involved. When you're designing, your ethics are built into what you create. You design your home is built on your ethics. I don't have an Alexa or a Nest in my house, a Ring. People are like, why not? I'm like, well, I had small children, and child development, they think an Alexa is a person. So when they talk to Alexa and Alexa says something mean back, they think a person's being mean to them. That's a computer. And I also know Google, and I know that they're surveilling me, and they're taking this data and they're reselling it, and that's fine. It's capitalism, I guess, but I don't want them to surveil my kids. I don't want someone hacking into my Nest and being to surveil my house, because that's cyber stalking. And if y'all don't think that happens, you're absolutely incorrect. Right? Think about the baby monitors that you can hack and just look in people's houses. Okay? So I don't have any of that, because I don't need to have it be so convenient that I have to, turn on my lights for my office building. You know what I mean? Like, I can give up a lot of convenience for safety. Right? But a lot of people just don't even think. They're like, it would be great to have a Ring camera. I'm like, no. I just won't answer the door. I just won't pick up the phone. People are like, that's ringing. I'm like, yeah, and you're standing there. Like, I don't have to answer. And they act astonished. I'm like, I have agency over that piece of equipment. I don't have to answer. I don't have to, when something vibrates on my arm, I don't have to do anything. Okay, so this, I talk about all of these, but what I want to talk about is quality of life. Our technological decisions have had a significant impact on our quality of life. And I know it, and I tell my students this, because I have a very different quality of life than yours. And I go berserk. I'll try not to go too berserk. In the School of Business, we have this room, it's called the wellness room. And it's basically a room you go in and it's quiet and you sit there and you meditate. And I go crazy. We don't have enough room for people to work together, and it's about student wellness to make you all feel better. I can tell you how to make a wellness room. Don't want to know? You turn off your phone and you take your earphones out and you sit there for a minute and you think your thoughts. You don't need the School of Engineering and the School of Business to put a room there and decorate it and put some flowers in it. Like, you can do all that yourself. You can have a silent walk. We all had them before 1992, before Walkmans were around. We did it every day. And it's astonishing, really. We often think about what we gain with technology. It's all about, but I want this, it's so convenient. You're lonelier, you're more depressed, you have no friends, you've torn up your community fabric, you have lost things. You have 2 artists that make money off of recorded music. I had 50 or more when I was your age. You have 2. The only way people make money now is via touring. So you've taken everybody over 40 and made them unable to make money as a creative because they can't tour enough to make money. So a catalog that used to be worth billions of dollars because of digital replication now is almost worthless. We're losing, and we're really on the cusp of losing with AI and our entire creative society, with art and with music and with writing, books and screen. I mean, we have no idea. And you're thinking, oh, I'm just thinking an AI engine. I'm just thinking the next billion-dollar company. I'm like, no, you are absolutely dooming yourself to ensuring that there is no cultural life that is worthwhile, because then it becomes a gig. And let me tell you something about excellence in anything. It takes time, it takes work. The reason why people are really good at these things is because they have time. And if you make it so that they can't financially sustain themselves doing it full time, it becomes a part-time thing and they never get to be as good. And that's how you doom yourself. Oh, just trust me. Okay. This is what you have to consider. I'll listen to bands that we have as much as the next girl or gal, right? I mean, it's not that I'm saying that it's all bad, but you're losing things. And I don't think people think about this. I'm forced to think about it because I had a life in a world that was very different than yours. And it came so fast, this technology, that no one thought about it because they didn't know what they were thinking about, right? I got into situations where I had friends whose children were coordinating things like buying drugs with their cell phones. And I was trying to explain to their parents, hey, pot, I mean, it wasn't big, but I was like, hey, you should probably monitor your children's texts. And they were like, no, that's invading their privacy. I'm like, but you pay the bill. Like, and they're like, nah. I'm like, well, then the police are going to show up at your house, which they did, and you're going to be responsible. Who prepares you for that? You're making decisions that you think are good and no one prepares you, right? You think, oh, you know, there are plenty of people. There's a lot more music. There's a bunch of YouTube. I'm like, yeah, that is what we call the spread of mediocrity. There are a bunch of people on YouTube. None of them are great. There's a difference between an average actor or an average musician or an average painter and an elite one. And it's not always clear because it takes all that time to become elite. It takes all that time. And if you can't afford it, you don't do it. And then what happens makes people even madder because the rich people are the only people with time. And then you get mad that there's a class difference. You see what I'm getting at? Like, nothing that's happening that makes people mad is a surprise. But we can think about this and make active choices. I think what we do in life is things come at us so fast that we don't make active choices. And I want us to do this about our quality of life. When you're investigating, and this will be made available to you so you can read these, but when you're investigating incidents of cybersecurity threats, or you're investigating software failures, or even when you're looking at things that are happening in your life that with respect to technology, okay? So I was looking at a cybersecurity threat. This was back when I did this for a living. And because I was in national defense, it was a little different. Cyber risk in corporate is just, again, it's risk. It's a little different. But we were trying to figure out why this particular attack was happening to try to determine who did it. Who did it? notice that I didn't say what did it. I said, who did it? So I had to determine the social actor that instituted that threat. So all my technical wizardry to figure out how many zero-day exploits they used, what type of software, advanced persistent threat they used, that was all great. But at the end, I had to look at all of that, and I had to look at a pile of clothing and say, who would wear that? Who did that? And then what was their motivation? And then how could I prevent that? Because the only way I could prevent it was not by saying, I'm going to not allow blue shirts in, and I'm not going to allow brown pants. I had to figure out how not to let that mindset in, right? And so I have to look at the context. I have to look at the interfaces between the social and the technical to have a full security interface analysis. I cannot just say, well, I can, but I'm going to leave myself wide open. I can't just say blue shirts and brown pants because that's what I found in my threat analysis. It's not going to work out. A similar thing, I saw the saddest thing. It was sad to me when my children were younger. My husband and I would be on our phones a lot at the house. And my daughter she's about 4. She was hanging off my husband's arm trying to get his attention, and he had his face in his phone. And I was like, this is it. Our kids are not going to grow up thinking that our phones are more important than them. Like, they're just not. So we had to institute a policy of phones in the basket. So when you walk in our house, your phone has to go in a basket for like the 4 hours that they're awake, from like 5 to 9. We don't look at our phones. I get the exception because I make recipes, like I have to cook and I suck at it, so I have to read recipes. But that's it. Like, you're not on your phone. You watch TV, but no kid is going to look at you and try to get your attention and you're looking at a phone. That means I can't read my books. I can't be listening to my music unless I'm listening to it with them, right? Because that sends a signal. I can't text and drive. You shouldn't anyway, okay? But what's important? I went to a funeral. I never want to do it again, of a colleague of mine out here at VCU, another university I was teaching at. His son, 24 years old, ended up under a semi on I-40 in North Carolina. He was texting and driving, didn't see the semi slow down, his sedan right under the semi. He was decapitated. Didn't slow down, he's on his phone. See, they can geolocate all that now. So can you imagine being the dad of someone who had sent him to 4 years of school, 4 years of high school, proud as can be, and he's texting and driving on the interstate and he's decapitated? And we're all going to the funeral and we all know this? And it's just tremendous sadness, just tremendous, and completely avoidable. If you do it, think about who is going to miss you when you're gone, right? Because that's what it's about. And yeah is not important enough. Like, it can all wait. Or you do like I do, and you get off on the exit and text who you need to text. It's really that important. Okay? So that's the ethics of it. I'm also putting other people in danger when I text and drive. Ford, Tesla, all of these companies are looking at putting software in cars to try and get you to pay attention. We're also putting health devices in cars. So if you have a heart attack, or if you pass out, or you have an epileptic seizure, the car can drive itself to safety. Like, that's where they're at. And so that's stuff that you don't control. Imagine what they're trying to do to get people to stop being ridiculous. Okay, but on the flip side, we were at a hackathon, an innovation hackathon in Detroit, where people were, students your age were putting their ideas together for what would be an innovation. And the winning idea, which made me furious, but they won, was to basically put a movie console in the front dashboard. Why would that make me furious?
Distracting.
Yeah, why would a driver be able to do anything? You know why you want buttons and dials on a car? So you can feel it without moving your eyes off the road. Tactile input. When you have a flat screen, you have to look. It's elegant, but it's dangerous. Kind of like a well-dressed prostitute. Elegant, dangerous. You got to consider if that's the life that you want. I'm not kidding. I use shocking analogies because we don't think about it this way. We get overexcited about the design. And we think, oh, that's just so great. I used to love having gas burners because my kids would know where to not put their hands. Now I have a flat ceramic top. And I'm like, it's not visual about where you're going to burn yourself or not anymore. It's not as easy to see. We've designed away safety for elegance again. All right. So we need to think about this. By the way, cybersecurity not as sexy as some of my other examples. So that's why I use other things. The other problem we have is with the law. America's a great place. But the problem we have with our law is we're very innovative for one reason. It's not because we have the best universities, although that helps. It's not because we have the smartest people. That's a toss-up. It's not because we have the most money, also a toss-up. We're the most innovative because we have common law versus civil law. This makes us, and not a dictatorship, this makes us very different than any other nation in the world because we got out from under Great Britain's common law too, but civil law, the EU, basically says you can't put a product on the market until we approve it. In the US, you can break the law until we tell you you can't do it anymore. You see the difference? Tesla can put autopilot out there. It's perfectly illegal because software can't take liability and not tell you that they turn off the software 5 seconds before impact so that you take the liability for it, even though you cannot possibly respond in human time to that being turned off. That's legal until a lawsuit says it's illegal and they have to deactivate software. So we allow people to have illegal models with edgy technology while we wait for the legislators to catch up. Think cigarettes, think opioids, I can think of a ton of technologies that are out there that maybe shouldn't have been. But we didn't stop them until we found out later on that they were having deleterious effects. That's why America is so innovative. Because that's how we operate. Fast and loose. It's great. I'm not saying it's bad. A lot of great things happen because we allow people to think this way. But there's a lot of danger in it too, right? It's why we're so different. Okay. And this comes, again, remember, this has a distinct upside. I'm not saying that it's bad. I live here. Thought this country, I'm a big homer. Okay. It's Veterans Day today, by the way. Right. So upside. But it has systemic societal effects, right? Systemic societal effects that we need to think about. Or you should at least be aware of the trade-offs that you're making. Understand that social media consumption by people in their young adulthood is going to have a permanent effect on the formation of friendships later on. So whereas I have friends, I'm 51, that I've had for 35 years, you may never have friends that you will have for 35 years. Because you've met them online and those are your friends. But then think about a funeral. Think about people that you go to when you're most distressed. Who do you have? Is a virtual hug the same as a real one? Have you given that up? Right? Where do you congregate when you're upset about the slaughters in Gaza or Ukraine? The student union with people you don't know? Right? People you met on a Facebook group? These are things to think about. I'm not judging. I sound judgy because that's how I sound, but I'm not. I just want you to think about it because people don't. We don't think about what we're giving up. Where is the engineering responsibility in this? As you're building things, as you're visioning the future, because to build something, to be a creator, art, science, to be a creator, you have to have a vision of the future. You have to have a vision of what you're making. Where does that come in? Where does what you want the future to look like come in? Where does what society looks like come in? Okay. Engineering is not for everyone. Pulse oximeters, real tone photography. Again, I'm laughing because he has experience with this. A lot of us do. If you have African-American friends and you take pictures with them as a Caucasian person, they're going to look completely dark and you're going to look completely bright. It's a horrible situation. And I saw a commercial that actually made me mad, and it's for Google's Pixel phone, and they have something called real tone photography. And it made me furious. It's in their new Pixel, 7 or 8, whatever the next number is. And why did it make me mad? Well, the story of photography is basically the story of Kodak, Polaroid, and they developed film that is optimized on green, blue, and red. It's all optics, physics really. And there is a point that resolves the most color. And when they did it for photographs, they optimized it to our skin type. By ours, I mean Caucasian, because we had the most money and we were going to be the people who bought cameras and film. It was an economic decision. Well, there came a point when the South African government, and again, this was before all of your time mostly, but the South African government had a problem because they needed to take photographs of people of color and be able to resolve them because they had a system of apartheid going. And for those of you who don't know what apartheid is, it was basically keeping people of color in slums in South Africa, and you could live there, and then you came through checkpoints with your passport of a person of color. That's basically legalized physical separation by passport, very similar to what's happening to the Palestinians in Israel. Is the only thing that y'all wouldn't know now, but it was much more serious under apartheid, I think. And they had pictures, right? So you had to know that they had the identity, because that told you where you could go. Because you couldn't even go everywhere in the country. You could only go in places that you were permitted, right? This is how they made sure that the people of color weren't going to rise up and overtake the government. And they went to Polaroid, they said, look, we need a different type of film because all these Africans look alike. Indians too. Anybody who was dark-skinned was put under apartheid. And they're like, we need. And they're like, okay. And we need a lot of it because we make a lot of these passbooks every year. Kodak's like, okay. So they went to their labs, this was in the 50s and 60s, and they made film that was optimized to dark skin. They didn't sell it. It wasn't commercially available. They just shipped it to South Africa because nobody would buy it. African Americans were still segregated under Jim Crow in the United States. Couldn't vote. We didn't have civil rights. We didn't have Voting Laws Act of 1964. This feels like ancient history to you, but I mean, a lot of people are still alive today that lived in this. And so your camera is basically on your phone is a charge coupled device. Y'all know what that is, right? Like just a photon bucket. And it has the same gamma target for color as the white people film. We just digitize what we knew from film, white person film, is what I'm going to call it. So when you take a picture with your iPhone that doesn't have real-time photography, you're basically perpetuating that discrimination of optimizing white skin. But in a way that only marketers, thank you, School of Business, could do. Google's like, America's moving to be more people of like darker skin and different color, right? And maybe we get enough complaints of people having bad pictures that we should do something. So they went and they resurrected this technology and they put it in their phones and they called it a feature. You're being sold a feature of deliberate discrimination. Real-time photography that is not in any phone. Every single phone with one firmware update could have it. Why is it like this? Well, I can tell you why it's like this, but let's not get me on my cynical mode today. I'm going to try to stay positive and stay out of my villain era, right? This is one of my master students from the School of Business, so he knows me. He's seen me in my villain era. He doesn't want me to get out of the cage, right? So you study this stuff enough and you get a little bit mad, or I do. Right? The heart study, almost all of our cardiac information that we have today that we train our AI on, which by the way, is artificial, but is not intelligent. And it isn't intelligent because that entire database of data is on white people in the suburbs of Boston. No women, no people of color. The database was constructed in the 60s. What heart data does it have on me when women present differently with heart attacks? None. We're still using that to train models and to make medicine today. Not helpful. Not helpful. They're like, well, we updated it. Guess what? They updated 10% of it. Okay, let me put it differently. We can have a society this way. We do now. Is this what we want it to be? Is it going to serve us? And I would argue no, it's not. And I'm just looking at healthcare. My favorite ladies, I'm so happy to see as many ladies as I see here because I don't typically see as many as I'm seeing. Sally Ride was the first woman in space. They were worried, even though it was not going to happen, that she was going to have her period in space, and they packed 100 tampons for her. And they asked her if that was enough. Gentlemen, if nobody's giving you the 411, she might not have been having it. They could have actually just asked her because it's not like doesn't happen all the time. And you're not up in space for an entire month on the space shuttle, maybe a week or two. But you definitely wouldn't need 100. And all you had to do was ask. But instead, they made it an engineering decision instead of a social decision, and they singled her out, and she had to have been, as the electrical engineer from Stanford that she was, which is what a lot of us do, go, what an... I say, do you know how much money I have? I would love to have a truck. Do you know why I don't have a truck? Besides, you know, it would look ridiculous. I wear skirts, and I can't get up into the cab of a truck because my clothing won't let me. If you could figure out how I could get into one and still have me be in clothing, you would make $1 jillion off of me. If you don't care about me being your customer, you won't get my money. You just didn't ask. Women spend 90% of the disposable income. You make it, we spend it, generally speaking. Do they ever ask us? The product developers at Procter & Gamble, Unilever, these are the big consumer products, you know, Crest and Tide and all that, 90% of them are men. I'm like, when was the last time a dude cared about laundry detergent? Seriously, would y'all go in there and be like, no, I'm gonna have this over that? This is low-hanging fruit, gentlemen and ladies, low-hanging fruit that we can fix, okay? All right, this type of engineering thinking is not helpful when looking to address the future. In healthcare, I'm in healthcare because 100% of the human population is going to be a consumer of healthcare. Y'all need healthcare of some sort. But there are lots of places you can make a difference. The ethics of design. To wrap up, and I'm gonna go, I apologize. I get so excited that I talk too long. It's not a matter of economics any longer. Now we're at the point where you're gonna be held legally liable as an individual in most firms. And the Flint water crisis, the Volkswagen emissions, Boeing. I don't know if y'all have heard about the 737 MAX planes that went down. Well, every Boeing plane design has to be signed off by a professional engineer. The only engineers that do not have to have a certification are software engineers. And I want all of you to think about what a stain that is on our professional reputation, that we don't have to have a PE, because that means we don't have a professional standard that we hold ourselves to as to the quality of what we design. Just hold that aside and think about it, okay? Everybody else does, including mechanical engineers, people who make Boeing planes. Boeing engineers will let their licenses lapse because they don't want to have to sign off on those, because they don't have control over the decisions that are made to alter those down the line that will cause these types of accidents. Because they don't want to be held individually liable when the MAX goes down. And Boeing's like, you got to sign it. No. And these are friends of mine. I mean, you know, people that I have am colleagues with from my fellowship at MIT and from other places that I've been in the military. I mean, this is what they're saying. They're like, you know, we know we're on the line here. Pay, and they will. You're gonna have to pay now. And this is where it's really changed in the past 5 or 10 years. That's why you have people at Google or Microsoft saying, we're not gonna make facial recognition software. We're just not doing it. We have the smarts too, but we're not gonna develop it because you're gonna sell it to law enforcement. Even though you say you're gonna send it to security company, we're not doing it because we don't trust what you're gonna sell it to. Right? I think there are a lot of engineers who are professionally sandbagging. You know what I mean by that? They're professionally not developing what they could develop because they are concerned about how it would be applied commercially. They're sandbagging. They could do it, but they know the relative ethical level of their employer, and they're just not doing it. You can't get fired for doing a job that they don't know that you can do. Right? So they don't know that you can make the atom bomb or not. So you can. Don't have to tell them. They can't go and, do a line report. You can make facial recognition that could do minority report stuff. Not going to design it because you don't trust what they're going to do with it. And if you think that you're going to get a job in a company that isn't going to ask you to do something unethical, you're funny. They will. That's why we have junior people. This is for you to answer. What personal responsibility do you think engineers have? I'm going to argue the more, the better. Because the more you feel like you have, the more you're going to ask these questions. And even if you decide to be completely unethical, at least you've asked yourself the question. I don't care if you're a cop or villain, go for it. Okay? But think about it at least. Think about it. Make it an informed decision. Have a reason. Do not blindly walk down these paths and realize 10, 20 years from now, oh my God, I did that and I had no idea. Okay? I didn't consider it. Can we versus should we? This is the big aha moment. And the aha moment is often we consider engineering to be a can we field. Can we do this? Can we is about basic scientific discovery. This is Ohm's law and things that are universally applicable. I'm going to argue that engineering as an applied field is not can we, but it's should we. Should we do this? I have a fundamental belief that engineers can build, design, create, solve any problem within the bounds of basic science. If basic science allows you to do it, you could probably design it. In fact, engineers develop empirically a lot of basic science before the theorists figure out what they've done. Friction, wave-particle duality, a lot of things, experiments, engineers have come up with first before they could be designed. So now should we make these things? Should we apply them? Okay, and that's what I really want you to think about. From Oppenheimer to Zuckerberg, should we do these things? And as budding engineers, that this is what I would implore you to think about. And I have kept you. It is now 1:03, and I am so sorry, but thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I'll stick around if you have a minute and you want to ask any questions. Again, I'm here at VCU. I'm Baker EW at vcu.edu. I'm also a professor in your CISS program, which is going to be your master's degree of cybersecurity, technical and social. I think it starts next year. I'm not sure when it does, but I teach the whole class on this. I teach the ethics part and I teach safety and healthcare. So that's what my specialties are, but I'm not as interesting as I think this topic is, so I didn't spend a lot of time on myself. So again, thank you so much, and y'all have a great rest of your Friday and weekend. Take good care.